Mornings. Am I right? The alarm clock's a monster, the coffee's lukewarm, and the only thing standing between me and sweet, sweet oblivion, aka my warm bed, is the dreaded chore of taking out the trash. It's a ritual, a mundane, utterly unglamorous ritual that I perform every Tuesday morning like clockwork. Grab the overflowing bags, wrestle them into the bins, roll the bins to the curb, and try not to get any stray coffee grounds on my pajamas. You know the drill. So, this particular Tuesday morning, I'm shuffling around in my pajamas, bleary-eyed and grumpy, armed with a mountain of garbage bags. I open the back door, ready to face the trash can gauntlet, and wait. Where are they? I blink. I rub my eyes. I scan the area. Nope. They're definitely gone. My trusty green trash cans, my faithful receptacles of refuse, my partners in grime, vanished. Poof. Like they'd been abducted by aliens, or, something equally improbable. My initial reaction? Confusion. Pure, unadulterated confusion. Did I forget to put them out last week? I mutter to myself, racking my brain. Nope. I distinctly remember wrestling that rogue pizza box into the bin. It was a struggle, a memorable struggle. Then, disbelief. This has got to be a prank, I think. One of my neighbors is messing with me. I mean, who steals trash cans? It's not exactly a high-value heist. They're trash cans. They're full of, trash. Who would want them? I check behind the shed. I check behind the bushes. I even check behind the, slightly overgrown, rose bushes, just in case they'd somehow magically teleported themselves there. Nothing. They're just gone, like they never existed. Like I've entered some kind of trash canless dimension. It's surreal and slightly unsettling. And then I get angry, because this isn't just a prank. This is something else, something more sinister, something HOA related. I can feel it in my bones. And I'm not going to like it, not one bit. These guys are obsessed with neighborhood standards, the way some people are obsessed with collecting stamps. Only instead of stamps, they collect complaints. They're like the self-appointed lawn police of Oak Garden Estates, patrolling the streets for rogue dandelions and unauthorized garden gnomes. They've probably got a special hotline dedicated to reporting unsightly refuse receptacles. And sure enough, a few days later, the official notice arrives. Crisp white envelope, fancy font, the whole 9 yards. It's from the Architectural Harmony Committee. Yes, they actually have a committee for that. Apparently, my trash cans were deemed, wait for it, unsightly. Unsightly? Seriously? They're trash cans. Their entire purpose in life is to hold trash. What, are they supposed to be decorated with little bows and ribbons? Maybe I should have painted them to match the beige houses in the neighborhood? The letter goes on to say my unsightly receptacles detracted from the aesthetic harmony of Oak Garden Estates. Aesthetic harmony? Give me a break. It's a suburb, not a Renaissance painting. And then the kicker. Not only did they deem my trash cans unsightly, but they also confiscated them, stole them, basically. And then, to add insult to injury, they slapped me with a $250 fine. $250 for having trash cans. That's it. That's the moment I snapped. They messed with the wrong garbage wrangler. They wanted aesthetic harmony. I'd give them aesthetic harmony. But it wasn't going to be pretty or beige. Okay, so the HOA stole my trash cans and fined me $250 for the crime of having trash cans. Yeah, that's not going to stand. I'm not about to let a bunch of beige-obsessed busybodies dictate how I dispose of my garbage. This calls for retaliation. Glorious, over-the-top, utterly ridiculous retaliation. Unsightly, huh? I muttered to myself, rereading the infuriating letter. They want aesthetic harmony? I'll give them aesthetic harmony. The idea sparked in my mind, big and bold and beautifully petty. If they wanted to play the aesthetic harmony game, I'd play it too. But I wasn't going to play by their rules. Oh no, I was going to play by my own rules. Rules that involved a dumpster. A massive, industrial-sized dumpster. It was perfect. A giant metal middle finger to the HOA. and their obsession with pristine lawns. A monument to their overzealous rules and their, shall we say, unique approach to waste management. The image popped into my head. A huge, overflowing dumpster parked right in front of the HOA office. A beacon of garbage. It was beautiful. It was ridiculous. It was exactly the kind of aesthetic harmony the HOA deserved. I knew right then and there. This wasn't just about getting my trash cans back. This was about making a statement, about standing up to the Beige Brigade and their ridiculous rules, and about having a little bit of fun in the process, because honestly, those HOA letters were starting to get on my nerves. And a giant, overflowing dumpster? That was exactly the kind of therapy I needed. It was going to be glorious. Absolutely glorious. Okay, so Operation Dumpster was a go. I needed a dumpster. Not just any dumpster. I needed a monster of a dumpster. The kind you see on construction sites, the kind that could hold, a mountain of garbage. A monument to refuse. A testament to, to the sheer volume of trash the HOA clearly thought was unsightly. I hit up Google, naturally. Dumpster rental, I typed, and a list of local companies popped up. I called a few, asking about sizes, prices, and delivery options. I played it cool, of course. Just doing some spring cleaning, I told them. Got a lot of stuff to get rid of. They didn't need to know the stuff was destined for the HOA's pristine doorstep. I settled on a behemoth, a 30-yarder. This thing was huge. It was practically the size of a small car. It was rusty. It was dented. It was perfect. It was exactly the kind of imposing, garbage-hauling monstrosity I needed to make my point. The guy who delivered it was a bit of a character himself, a grizzled old trucker with a twinkle in his eye. He clearly knew what I was up to. HOA trouble, eh? He chuckled, winking. This baby'll teach 'em a lesson. He dropped it off in my driveway, and it looked like a spaceship had landed. It was so big, it barely fit. I had to maneuver it carefully to avoid scraping the side of my house. It was a tight squeeze, but I managed it. And then came the strategic placement. This wasn't just about having a dumpster. This was about making a statement, a loud statement. And that meant location, location, location. My plan was simple, yet elegant. I was going to park this monstrous metal beast right in front of the HOA office. A garbage-filled gift delivered straight to their doorstep. I waited until nightfall, naturally. I didn't want any nosy neighbors, or worse, HOA patrols, interfering with my masterpiece. I hooked up my truck to the dumpster. It had wheels, thank goodness, and slowly, carefully, towed it down the street. It was a bit of a challenge. The dumpster was heavy and it was dark, and I may have had a few close calls with parked cars. But I persevered. This was too important. Finally, I arrived at the HOA office. It was late. The building was dark and deserted. Perfect. I positioned the dumpster directly in front of the main entrance, blocking the doorway like a metal gatekeeper. It was a glorious sight. A huge, rusty, overflowing dumpster, a monument to the HOA's obsession with aesthetic harmony. It was perfect. Absolutely perfect. And the best part? It was just the beginning. Okay, so the dumpster was in place. A hulking metal behemoth blocking the entrance to the HOA office. It was a masterpiece of petty revenge, a monument to bureaucratic overreach, and a testament to the sheer audacity of my plan. But it wasn't complete yet. It needed content. And that content needed to be, let's just say it needed to be memorable. But first, the delivery, the grand unveiling, the moment I unleashed my garbage-filled gift upon the unsuspecting HOA. It was early morning, just as the sun was starting to peek over the horizon. I parked a safe distance away and watched. I wanted to savor this moment. I wanted to witness the reactions. The first to arrive were the early morning dog walkers. They stopped, they stared, they pointed. Their faces were a mixture of confusion, amusement, and a tiny bit of fear, maybe. I mean, it was a massive, overflowing dumpster parked right in front of the HOA office. It wasn't exactly a normal sight. Then came the commuters, rushing to work, bleary-eyed and caffeine-deprived. They slowed down, craning their necks to get a better look. Some chuckled, some shook their heads, some just stared in disbelief. It was like a roadside attraction, only instead of a giant ball of twine, it was a giant ball of, well, garbage. And then the HOA arrived. Oh, the HOA. Their reactions were priceless. They pulled up in their pristine beige SUVs, ready to start their day of neighborhood standard enforcement, and, well, they were greeted by a mountain of trash. Their faces, it was a symphony of emotions. Shock, obviously. Disgust, definitely. And then, rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. Mrs. Shelley, the HOA president, looked like she was about to spontaneously combust. Her face turned an alarming shade of purple, and her mouth was moving, but no words came out. She looked like a goldfish gasping for air. The other HOA members weren't much better. They were all staring at the dumpster, their mouths agape, their eyes wide with disbelief. It was like they couldn't comprehend what they were seeing, like they'd stumbled into some kind of alternate reality where trash cans ruled the world. I could practically hear their internal monologues. That dumpster! Who, how? They were speechless. Utterly, completely speechless, which, honestly, was the best part. Their outrage was so intense, it had rendered them incapable of coherent thought. It was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And it was just the beginning, because the dumpster wasn't just there to be there. It was there to make a point, a big, smelly, overflowing point. And that meant it needed content. Lots and lots of content, and I had just the stuff to fill it. Okay, so the dumpster was in place, the HOA was losing their minds, and it was time for the deposit. This wasn't just about having a dumpster. This was about making a statement. A big, smelly, overflowing statement. And that meant it needed content. Lots and lots of content. Actual, real, smelly garbage. The kind of garbage the HOA clearly thought was too unsightly for public consumption. I'd been preparing for this moment, naturally. I'd been collecting. Let's just say I'd been strategically accumulating offensive items for the past few days. Household trash, yard waste, you name it. I even borrowed some particularly pungent compost from my neighbor's garden. Don't worry, I returned it later, after the HOA had their fun. I started loading the dumpster. It was a glorious, disgusting symphony of refuse. Overflowing garbage bags, overflowing with, well, you know, the usual suspects. Pizza boxes, takeout containers, junk mail, the remnants of last night's questionable culinary experiment. The kind of stuff everyone throws away, but the HOA apparently deemed too unsightly for my trash cans. Then came the yard waste. Clippings from my slightly overgrown lawn, branches from my slightly unruly rose bushes, and a veritable mountain of leaves. Because, you know, aesthetic harmony. And then, the strategically placed offensive items. A half-eaten watermelon, strategically positioned near the top, its bright pink flesh gleaming in the morning sun. A bag of particularly pungent compost, nestled amongst the leaves, its aroma wafting gently in the breeze. A few strategically placed, shall we say, questionable items I'd found lurking in the back of my fridge. You know, just to add a little extra flavor to the mix. It was a masterpiece of garbage, a veritable Mount Trashmore, a monument to refuse. It was perfect, absolutely perfect. But it wasn't quite complete yet. It needed a finishing touch, a message, a clear, concise, and utterly sarcastic message directed straight at the HOA. I grabbed a piece of cardboard, a marker, and wrote, "Since you love stealing trash, here's some more." I taped the sign to the side of the dumpster, right where everyone could see it. It was simple. It was direct. It was dripping with sarcasm. It was perfect. And then I stepped back, admired my handiwork, and waited. I knew it wouldn't be long before the HOA discovered my little gift, and I couldn't wait to see their faces. It was going to be glorious. Absolutely glorious. Okay, so the dumpster was deployed, the garbage was deposited, the message was written. All that was left was to wait for the inevitable HOA meltdown, and it didn't take long. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. The HOA members arrived at their office one by one in their pristine business attire, ready to tackle another day of neighborhood standard enforcement. And then they saw it, the dumpster, the mountain of garbage, the sign. Their reactions were, well, they were a sight to behold. It was like watching a group of synchronized swimmers suddenly encounter a shark. Their faces, it was a symphony of shock, disgust, and pure, unadulterated panic. They stopped dead in their tracks, their mouths agape, their eyes wide with disbelief. It was like they couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. Like they'd stumbled into some kind of garbage-themed horror movie. Some of them recoiled, as if the dumpster was emitting some kind of toxic fumes, which, let's be honest, it probably was. Others just stared, their faces a mixture of confusion and disgust. It was like they'd never seen garbage before, or at least not in such abundance. And then there was Mrs. Shelley. Oh, Mrs. Shelley. She arrived in her pristine white SUV, looking like she was ready to conquer the world, or at least the landscaping of Oak Garden Estates. And then she saw it. The dumpster, the mountain of garbage, the sign, her face. It was a masterpiece of rage. Her eyes narrowed, her lips thinned, and her face turned an alarming shade of purple. She looked like she was about to explode, like she was going to spontaneously combust from sheer, unadulterated fury. She let out a shriek. A high-pitched, ear-piercing shriek that could probably be heard all the way down the street. That garbage! She shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the dumpster. How could anyone... She was beyond words. She was incandescent. She was apoplectic. She was basically a human pressure cooker about to blow its top. The other HOA members were scrambling around her, trying to calm her down. But it was no use. She was on a rampage, a garbage-fueled rampage. This is unacceptable, she shrieked. This is a travesty. This is an outrage. This is unsightly. There's that word again. She was pacing back and forth, her arms flailing, her face redder than a ripe tomato. She looked like she was about to charge at the dumpster, ready to wrestle it to the ground. The other HOA members were just staring at her, their faces a mixture of fear and amusement. They were clearly terrified of her wrath, but I could see a few of them trying to stifle a laugh. It was glorious, absolutely glorious. The HOA's panic was palpable. They were losing their minds. And I was just sitting back watching the show, sipping my coffee, and enjoying every single minute of it. Okay, so Mrs. Shelley was having a full-blown meltdown, the other HOA members were trying to look busy, and the dumpster sat there, a silent, smelly testament to my, shall we say, unique approach to waste management. The next step was inevitable. The call to the cops. Sure enough, a couple of police cars showed up, sirens wailing, lights flashing. It was like a scene from a bad cop drama, only instead of a high-speed chase, it was a high-stakes dumpster standoff. The HOA members, led by Mrs. Shelley, who had somehow managed to compose herself slightly, swarmed the officers, pointing accusing fingers at the dumpster, at the sign, and, of course, at me. "He did it!" Mrs. Shelley shrieked, her voice still a little shaky. "He dumped all this garbage here! It's illegal! It's vandalism! It's unsightly!" There's that word again. The other HOA members chimed in, nodding vigorously and echoing her accusations. "Illegal dumping!" they cried. "Disruption of the peace! Aesthetic terrorism!" Okay, maybe they didn't say that last one, but I wouldn't have been surprised. The police officers, bless their hearts, looked a little bewildered. They were clearly not expecting to be dealing with a garbage-related crime scene. They looked at the dumpster, they looked at the HOA members, they looked at me. They looked like they were wondering if they'd accidentally wandered onto the set of a reality TV show. They approached me cautiously, like I was some kind of garbage-wielding maniac. "Sir," one of the officers said, We've received a complaint about illegal dumping. Can you explain what's going on here? I smiled sweetly. Officer, I said, I'd be happy to explain. I pulled out my trusty folder, filled with documentation. First, I said, I'd like to show you this. I handed him the fine from the HOA. As you can see, the HOA fined me $250 for having trash cans. They deemed them unsightly. I rolled my eyes. They then proceeded to confiscate my trash cans. I showed him the photos. Photos of my missing trash cans, neatly labeled and dated. These are my trash cans, I explained. Or rather, were my trash cans, until the HOA decided to appropriate them. Then I pulled out the rental agreement for the dumpster. This, I said, is a receipt for the rental of this dumpster. As you can see, it's legally rented in my name. I paused for dramatic effect. So, I continued, I'd like to understand what exactly is illegal about this. The HOA stole my property. I'm simply returning it, with interest. The police officers looked at each other, then back at the HOA members, then back at me. They were clearly trying to wrap their heads around the situation. It wasn't exactly your typical police call. So, one of the officers said slowly, let me get this straight. The HOA stole your trash cans and then fined you for it, and now you're returning their garbage. Precisely, I said, with interest. The officers chuckled. They couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation was just too much. The HOA members, however, were not amused. Mrs. Shelley was fuming. But, it's garbage, she sputtered. It's unsightly. Yes, ma'am, one of the officers said politely. It is. He turned back to me. Sir, do you have any proof that this garbage belongs to the HOA? I grinned. Officer, I said, I have a feeling that this garbage speaks for itself. I gestured to the overflowing dumpster, the pungent aroma wafting gently in the breeze. I believe the HOA will find familiar items within. The officers chuckled again. They got it. They understood the, shall we say, nuance of the situation, and they were clearly enjoying it. Ma'am, one of the officers said to Mrs. Shelley, I'm afraid there's nothing we can do. Mr. Paul has provided documentation showing that he legally rented this dumpster. And as he pointed out, the contents appear to be related to the missing trash cans. Mrs. Shelley was speechless. She was defeated. Outsmarted by a garbage-filled dumpster. It was poetic justice at its finest. Okay, so the police had spoken. My garbage gift was perfectly legal, technically. The HOA, predictably, was not happy. But they were stuck. They couldn't arrest me for returning stolen property, even if it was, well, a mountain of stolen property. And smelly and overflowing. The officers, bless their hearts, tried to maintain a professional demeanor, but I could see the amusement in their eyes. They knew what was going on. They understood the, shall we say, artistic statement I was making. Ma'am, one of the officers said to Mrs. Shelley, trying to suppress a grin, I understand your frustration, but Mr. Paul has provided documentation showing that he legally rented this dumpster, and as he pointed out, the contents appear to be related to the missing trash cans. He paused, then added with a twinkle in his eye, Perhaps you should discuss this further with your waste management department. Waste management department, Mrs. Shelley sputtered. But, we are the waste management department? The officer just shrugged. Well then, he said, I suggest you get to work. And with that, the police drove off, leaving the HOA to deal with the, shall we say, consequences of their actions. The scene that followed was glorious. Absolutely glorious. The HOA members, dressed in their pristine business attire, their perfectly pressed suits and their perfectly polished shoes, were forced to get their hands dirty. Literally. They were given gloves, masks, thankfully, and large garbage bags. And then, they had to start sorting through the dumpster Bag by bag, item by item, they had to sift through the evidence of their overzealousness. It was a sight to behold. Mrs. Shelley, her white suit now covered in, let's just say unidentifiable substances, was frantically digging through a bag of particularly pungent compost, her face a mask of disgust. Mr. Peterson, the HOA treasurer, was gingerly holding a half-eaten watermelon, trying not to gag. The other HOA members were just staring at the garbage, their faces a mixture of horror and resignation. The irony was delicious. These people, who were so obsessed with aesthetic harmony and neighborhood standards, were now forced to wade through a mountain of garbage. Their own garbage. Garbage they had deemed too unsightly for public consumption. Passers-by stopped to watch the spectacle, chuckling and shaking their heads. Some even took pictures. The HOA dumpster debacle was the talk of the town. It was a local legend in the making. And me? I was just sitting back, watching the show, sipping my coffee and enjoying every single minute of it. Finally, after hours of sorting, sifting, and gagging, the HOA managed to clear the dumpster. They were exhausted, humiliated, and covered in, let's just say they weren't looking their best. And then, the moment I'd been waiting for. My trash cans were returned, cleaned, polished, and accompanied by a groveling apology from Mrs. Shelley herself. "Mr. Paul," she said, her voice barely a whisper, we apologize for the misunderstanding regarding your refuse receptacles. We were wrong." "Apology accepted," I said with a smile. "Just try not to misunderstand my trash cans again." And with that, the HOA dumpster debacle was over. But the legend lived on. It became a symbol of resistance against overbearing HOAs, a testament to the power of garbage, and a reminder that sometimes the best way to fight bureaucracy is with a little bit of, you get the idea. It all started with a parking spot. Not just any parking spot, mind you. This was my driveway, my little slice of the suburban pie, where my trusty old car, Betsy, had rested peacefully for years. Betsy wasn't flashy, just a reliable, slightly faded blue sedan that got me from point A to point B. But the HOA, those guardians of good taste and enemies of anything remotely interesting, didn't see it that way. They saw Betsy as a threat, an aesthetic incompatibility that dared to disrupt the harmonious flow of our meticulously manicured neighborhood. The violation notice arrived on a Tuesday, tucked neatly amongst the bills and junk mail. "Your vehicle is in violation of community aesthetic standards," it declared in bold, bureaucratic font. "Remove the aforementioned vehicle or face a fine." I scoffed. "Aesthetic incompatibility?" I muttered to myself. "Have they seen Mr. Henderson's boat? That thing looks like it washed up from a shipwreck. And don't even get me started on the RV parked in Mrs. Johnson's driveway, or the collection of motorcycles that seem to multiply in Mr. Davis's yard every weekend. Yet, somehow, my little Betsy was the problem. I marched down to the HOA office, ready to fight for my car's right to exist. But Karen, the HOA president, with her perfectly coiffed hair and her condescending smile, was unmoved. "Rules are rules," she declared, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "And your car, I'm afraid, is simply an eyesore." "But what about the RV?" I protested. "And the motorcycles? And the boat that looks like it's about to sink in Mr. Henderson's driveway?" Karen's smile widened. "Those," she said, "are different. They're recreational vehicles. Your car, on the other hand, is simply unsightly." I stared at her, speechless. The hypocrisy was astounding. The HOA, those self-proclaimed guardians of good taste, were clearly playing favorites, and I, the owner of a perfectly functional car, was their latest victim. That's when I decided to fight back. Not with angry letters or petty complaints, but with a plan so audacious, so utterly ridiculous, that it would make their heads spin. "If they don't want my car in my driveway," I muttered to myself, a mischievous glint in my eye, "then I'll give them something they'll never forget." And so, my plan was hatched. A plan that would involve a crane, a whole lot of granite, and a healthy dose of good old-fashioned HOA-defying revenge. The HOA wanted to play hardball. Fine. I'd give them a game they couldn't win. If they didn't want my car in my driveway, I'd give them something they couldn't tow. Something that would make their precious aesthetic standards implode. I'm talking about a boulder. Not just any boulder, mind you. A massive, multi-ton behemoth of granite. The kind that makes you question the laws of physics and the sanity of the person who put it there. I started my search online, browsing through landscaping websites with a newfound appreciation for geological formations. "Think you can handle a boulder?" I asked the first sales rep I reached. "A boulder?" She chuckled. "Sure, we do boulders all the time. How big are we talking?" "Big," I replied casually. "Think Stonehenge." Silence. "Stonehenge?" she repeated, her voice a mix of disbelief and amusement. "Yep," I confirmed. "And I want it delivered. To my driveway." More silence. Then a burst of laughter. "You're kidding, right?" "Nope," I said, my grin widening. "This is serious boulder business." The sales rep, clearly intrigued by my project, and probably my sanity, agreed to take on the challenge. A few days later, a flatbed truck arrived, carrying my masterpiece. It was even more glorious than I had imagined. The boulder was massive, dwarfing my car and casting a long shadow across the lawn. It was a testament to nature's power and my own stubborn determination. The HOA, naturally, was not amused. Karen, her face a mask of fury, stormed over to my house, her heels clicking a menacing rhythm against the pavement. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the neighborhood. "What have you done?" "I've parked a boulder," I replied calmly, leaning against my new granite companion. "It's legally parked." Karen sputtered, her face turning an interesting shade of purple. "Legally parked?" she shrieked. "It's a boulder! It's an eyesore!" "An eyesore?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Karen, have you seen the giant metal rooster in Mrs. Henderson's yard? That thing could scare a flock of pigeons into cardiac arrest." Karen's eye twitched. She opened her mouth to retort, but no words came out. She just stood there, fuming, defeated by the sheer audacity of my boulder-based defiance. The boulder, my silent and immovable middle finger to the HOA, had become a symbol of resistance, a testament to the power of creative revenge. And the HOA, with their ridiculous rules and their petty tyranny, had finally met their match. The boulder itself was a masterpiece, a testament to nature's raw power and my own stubborn determination. But it needed a little something extra, a touch of personalized flair to really drive the point home. So I hired a local engraver, a guy named Tony with a thick mustache and a surprisingly steady hand. "I need you to engrave something on this boulder," I explained, pointing to the massive rock that now dominated my driveway. Tony raised an eyebrow. "A boulder?" He chuckled. "That's a new one. What do you want it to say?" I grinned. "Legally parked." Tony's eyes widened. "Legally parked," he repeated, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I like your style, kid." He got to work, his chisel chipping away at the granite, carving the words in bold, defiant letters. When he was finished, the boulder stood as a monument to my victory, a silent middle finger to the HOA, and a permanent reminder of their defeat. The HOA's reaction was nothing short of spectacular. Karen, bless her petty heart, nearly had a stroke when she saw it. "Legally parked?" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the neighborhood. "He's mocking us! He's flaunting his defiance!" The other HOA board members, a collection of bewildered retirees and overly serious professionals, gathered around the boulder, their faces a mixture of disbelief and outrage. "This is unacceptable," Mr. Henderson, the HOA president, sputtered. This Boulder, it's an eyesore." "An eyesore?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Mr. Henderson, have you seen the giant inflatable Santa Claus that Mrs. Higgins puts up every Christmas? That thing could scare a reindeer into early retirement." The HOA members grumbled, their arguments crumbling like a poorly built sandcastle. They couldn't deny that the boulder was, in fact, legally parked. And they couldn't exactly argue with the inscription, a testament to their own petty tyranny. "This isn't over," Karen hissed, her eyes narrowed. "We'll find a way to get rid of that rock." But I knew they wouldn't. The boulder, my silent and immovable champion, was there to stay. It had become a symbol of resistance, a testament to the power of creative revenge, and the HOA, with their ridiculous rules and their petty tyranny, had finally met their match. Karen, bless her perfectly coiffed heart, didn't disappoint. She stormed over to my house, her face a symphony of outrage, her voice a weaponized foghorn. "What in the HOA-approved hell is this?" she shrieked, gesturing wildly at the boulder. "You think you can just park a rock in your driveway and get away with it?" I leaned against the legally parked inscription, a smirk playing on my lips. "It's not just a rock, Karen," I corrected. "It's a decorative landscaping element. And yes, I believe I can get away with it." Karen's eye twitched. "Decorative?" she sputtered. "It's an eyesore. It's a safety hazard. It's an affront to the very fabric of our community." "Oh, relax, Karen," I said, my voice dripping with mock concern. "It's not like it's blocking anyone's view. Besides, have you seen Mr. Henderson's inflatable Santa Claus? That thing could give a child nightmares." Karen's face turned a delightful shade of magenta. She opened her mouth to retort, but I cut her off. "And before you threaten me with another violation notice, Karen, I'd like to remind you that I've consulted with a lawyer. I'm well aware of my rights, and I'm fully prepared to defend my decorative landscaping choices." Karen sputtered, defeated but not deterred. She spun on her heel and marched back to her perfectly manicured lawn, her HOA rulebook clutched like a shield. The next day, the violation notice arrived. "Unauthorized structure," it declared in bold, bureaucratic font. "Remove the aforementioned boulder or face a fine." I chuckled. "Unauthorized structure," I muttered to myself. "They're really grasping at straws now." I grabbed the HOA rulebook, a thick binder filled with ridiculously specific regulations. I flipped through the pages, searching for any mention of boulders, rocks, or decorative landscaping elements. Nothing. "See, Karen?" I said, calling her up on the phone. "Your outrage is based on nothing but your own arbitrary sense of aesthetics. You don't like my boulder? Tough luck, it's staying." Karen's voice crackled through the phone, a symphony of frustrated squawks. "This isn't over," she shrieked. "I'll find a way to get rid of that rock." "I'd like to see you try, Karen," I replied calmly. "But in the meantime, I think I'll add a few more decorative landscaping elements to my yard. Maybe a giant gnome, or a flock of pink flamingos, or—" I paused, letting the threat hang in the air. Karen sputtered, speechless. She knew she had been defeated. The HOA, with their ridiculous rules and their petty tyranny, had finally met their match. And the boulder, my silent and immovable champion, was there to stay. Karen and the HOA were fuming, but I was ready for them. I'd done my homework, consulted with a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. Apparently, that's a real thing. And I was armed with enough legal knowledge to make their heads spin. "You think you can bully me with your fines and your threats?" I said to Karen, my voice dripping with confidence. "Think again. I'm not backing down." Karen's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You'll be sorry." "I doubt it, Karen," I replied calmly, "but thanks for the concern." The HOA sent another violation notice, this time threatening a hefty fine and possible legal action. But I just laughed. They couldn't touch me. My Boulder was legally parked, and I had the paperwork to prove it. Meanwhile, the neighborhood had rallied around my cause. The Boulder, once a symbol of defiance, had become a community mascot. Kids were decorating it with chalk drawings. Teenagers were spray painting messages of support, some more appropriate than others. And Mrs. Higgins had even knitted a tiny hat for the "legally parked" inscription. "This is the best thing that's ever happened to this neighborhood," Mr. Johnson declared, his voice booming across the street. "Finally, someone standing up to those HOA bullies." And then the media arrived. A local news station, always eager for a quirky story, caught wind of the Boulder of Defiance. They sent a reporter and a camera crew to my house, ready to document my epic battle against the HOA. "So, tell me, Mr. Jack," the reporter asked, her microphone practically touching my nose, "what inspired you to park a Boulder in your driveway?" "Well," I replied, gesturing towards Karen's house, "let's just say I have a unique relationship with our HOA president." The reporter chuckled. "I see. And what do the neighbors think?" "They love it," I said, gesturing towards the kids drawing pictures on the Boulder. "It's become a symbol of our resistance against the HOA's tyranny." The news segment aired that evening, complete with dramatic close-ups of the Boulder and interviews with bewildered HOA members. The story went viral, turning my Boulder into a national sensation. People were sharing memes, writing articles, and even creating fan art of the "legally parked" inscription. The HOA, of course, was mortified. Their attempt to enforce conformity had backfired spectacularly, turning my Boulder into a symbol of defiance and a source of endless amusement. And Karen, the once feared HOA president, was now the butt of every joke, her authority crumbling faster than a gingerbread house in a hurricane. But the best part? The HOA was powerless to stop it. The Boulder was there to stay, a permanent reminder that sometimes the best way to fight the rules is to break them with a multi-ton rock. Karen, bless her rule-obsessed heart, wasn't one to back down. She saw the Boulder, she felt the sting of defeat, and she vowed revenge. Her weapon of choice? The HOA rulebook, of course. "There's got to be something in here," she muttered to herself, flipping through the pages with manicured fingers. "There's always a rule." And then she found it. Or rather, she didn't find it. There was no rule against boulders, no rule against rocks, no rule against, well, anything remotely resembling my magnificent, legally parked monolith. But Karen, ever resourceful, had a plan. She called an emergency HOA meeting, her voice crackling with authority over the phone. "We have a situation," she declared. "An oversized situation." The meeting was packed. Neighbors, intrigued by the drama, filled the room, their whispers and murmurs creating a buzz of anticipation. Karen, perched at the head of the table like a queen on her throne, glared at the assembled crowd. "This," she declared, her voice trembling with barely contained fury, "cannot stand. We must take action against this rock invasion." She proposed a new rule, a masterpiece of bureaucratic absurdity, a ban on oversized landscaping features. The room fell silent. Everyone knew this was aimed squarely at my boulder, my beloved symbol of defiance. But I wasn't about to let Karen win. I stood up, armed with a stack of photos and a mischievous grin. "Karen," I began, my voice calm and measured. "Before we start banning boulders, perhaps we should take a look around the neighborhood." I held up a photo of Mr. Henderson's giant inflatable Santa Claus, which took up half his front yard every Christmas. "Is this an oversized landscaping feature?" I asked. Another photo. Mrs. Higgins's collection of garden gnomes, which seemed to multiply every year. "What about these?" And finally a photo of the HOA's own sign, a massive wooden monstrosity that dwarfed my mailbox. "And this?" I asked, my voice dripping with irony. "Is this an oversized landscaping feature?" The room erupted in murmurs. Karen's face turned a delightful shade of puce. She sputtered, trying to defend her position, but the evidence was clear. The HOA, in their relentless pursuit of conformity, had created a neighborhood filled with oversized landscaping features. And now they were trying to ban my boulder, the very symbol of their defeat. The vote was swift and decisive. Karen's proposed rule was rejected, and the HOA was forced to admit defeat. They had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and outbouldered. And my rock, my magnificent, legally parked monolith, stood tall, a testament to the power of creative defiance and the enduring appeal of a good, old-fashioned HOA showdown. The HOA meeting ended with a whimper, not a bang. Karen, defeated and deflated, slunk out of the room, her dreams of boulder banning dashed against the rocks of my defiance. And the rulebook, let's be honest. But I wasn't done yet. Oh no, I had one more trick up my sleeve, one final flourish of petty brilliance. I went to the hardware store, bought a few gallons of the brightest, most obnoxious shade of red paint I could find, and got to work. The next morning, the HOA woke up to a sight that would make their eyes bleed. A giant crimson boulder, proudly proclaiming, "Legally parked," in the middle of my driveway. It was a masterpiece of defiance, a middle finger to the HOA, and a beacon of hope for all those who dared to dream of a world where boulders could be whatever color they damn well pleased. The HOA, bless their bureaucratic hearts, didn't even try to fight it. They knew they were beaten. They had tried to control my landscaping, and they had failed, spectacularly. A year later, I added the final touch, a bronze plaque engraved with the following inscription: "In loving memory of Karen's HOA reign, 2023 to 2023 inches." Okay, maybe her reign was a bit longer than that, but who's counting? The plaque was the perfect finishing touch, a tribute to my victory and a constant reminder of the HOA's defeat. It was also, I suspect, a source of endless frustration for Karen, who had since moved to a gated community with even stricter rules, and presumably no boulders. The boulder, my silent and immovable champion, became a beloved local landmark. Tourists would stop to take photos, kids would climb on it, much to the HOA's chagrin, and even the occasional dog walker would leave a respectful stick offering at its base. It was a symbol of resistance, a testament to the power of the individual, and a constant reminder that sometimes the best way to fight the rules is to break them, with a giant red boulder. And as I sat on my porch, sipping lemonade and watching the sunset over my boulder-dominated driveway, I couldn't help but smile. The HOA had tried to control me, and they had failed, spectacularly. And the boulder, my magnificent, legally parked HOA-defying champion, was there to stay. A permanent reminder that sometimes the best revenge is a rock.